Yeah, the theme is reclaiming this whole notion of what public education is.
There are issues that we need to tackle to rebuild, and reclaim what ought to be. And I say reclaim carefully because I don't know it was ever there before. To claim the kind of alliance that can not only overturn NCLB, but see that it's replaced.
We can think about reclaiming not just public education, but also the vision of what this is, the vision of the North Dakota Study Group.
These meetings serve many purposes: reaffirmation, encouragement, support, challenge, reconnections, revitalization, relationships, opportunities for hearing new language and different ways of thinking about schools and communities, teaching and learning, the society writ large.
No Child Left Behind managed to make a promise there that, while I think we should have known immediately couldn't be kept and was a disguise for something else, nevertheless it made a promise, and we have to think about how our alternatives to it are true to that promise rather than false to that promise.
So rather than a culture of poverty, what I think we see in schools is what Marty Haberman calls the pedagogy of poverty.
One of the things that we need to do when we use our voices, just talk, is to spread the words of our experience with kids and how amazing they are. And how amazing they are in ways that No Child Left Behind squashes.
This pedagogy of poverty is sufficiently powerful to undermine the implementation of any reform effort because it defines the way that pupils spend their time, the nature of the behaviors they practice, and the basis of their self-concepts as learners. Essentially, it is a pedagogy in which learners can succeed without becoming either involved or thoughtful.
And then finally, in the last row, there was this kid named Andrew. And I remember this kid, he had sandy hair and a snotty nose all the time, and he, a bit of a speech impediment. But when she said, "I bet he's a picket," he said, "No, he's not. No, he's not." And she said, "I bet he is." And he got loud, and he said, "He ain't. I'm telling you, he ain't." And then he looked to the rest of the class. He said, "He's not a picket. I tell you, he's not a picket." And there was this kind of appeal to all of us, these second graders, 7-year-olds. And then she turned around and started explaining to us, "I bet he is a picket." And there was this exchange, this moment where this woman's about 6 feet tall. She had arms like hams. But there was a moment when this little tiny, tiny kid stopped everything and would not back down. And when that happened, there was just a moment where everybody knew that the dynamics had changed.
But there were also voices of hope here, a plea for greater trust, for a larger commitment to the messiness of democracy. And democracy was given definition as messy. A terrible form of government, but probably the best that humans have devised thus far.
The Fire Youth Squad has gone on to hold press conferences and meet with elected officials at the state level, at the local level, meet with Bill Cosby, meet with the mayor. They've held meetings with the superintendent and all the principals of the high schools of the Recovery School District. And they are young people working for the improvement of public education in New Orleans. They come from different schools throughout the school system.
I remember on day one, standing in front of these young people and saying to them, "This is going to be a very tough class. It's going to be tough for you, and it's going to be tough for me. Because I am not used to teaching at-risk students."
Talk is at the heart of democratic life. And the action, the trusting of ordinary people's exercise of judgment is the doing of democracy.
Finally, this young man raises his hand. I said, yes, sir, man. What do you want to say? I am deeply offended at your reference to us as at risk. I said, oh, you are you? You've been at risk all of 10 minutes. And you are pissed off. I want you to think about that. When I send you out to these schools where people have sent their babies, the only kindergartner they got, and you've decided they're at risk, and you want them to carry that for the next 13 years?
We developed something we call youth forums. The youth forums put an emphasis on why don't we do something a little different? Why don't we listen to young people, the people who are the direct human beings involved in the education, who are the recipients or the people being served by the educational system, and learn from them what their experiences are and what their ideas are about schools and what they should be.
And the one group of people who are affected by these recommended changes at the Juvenile Detention Center, well, not the only group, but I'd say the most important group that was never asked, of course, is the kids. And so what we're trying to do as teachers at Nancy B. Jefferson Alternative School, which is the name of our school inside the jail, is provide a forum for our students to talk back and to say, this is what we want and what we hope for ourselves and for this place.
Power is important, and power yields nothing, as Frederick Douglass said, but to a demand. You may not get all that you pay for in this world, but you shall surely pay for all you get.
You got to figure out what you're going to do. And so the way we thought about doing it is that we would take on campaigns, public information campaigns, and we would build coalitions. And that part of building these campaigns and designing these campaigns is that you gear up to win. That you don't have to win them all, but there's a part of winning these campaigns that makes a difference.
So one of the places that where parents and teachers need to do is know the power of our voice in telling these stories and writing them in letters to the editor and speaking up at places. In a way, this has happened to parents and teachers because in some ways we've allowed ourselves to think our voice is not the voice of expertise.
The other question is, so what can I do about the policy climate? I mean, what do I do personally about what's going on? I mean, they're frustrated, and that a lot of times people don't know how or where to push back. And we've been talking a lot to people about, number one, well, if you don't like NCLB, have you at least picked up the phone and called your congressperson? Have you? And we'll ask, say, show of hands, how many of you have done it? You don't have to do it here, I don't want to. But we'll say, raise your hands if you've done it. In an audience of 300 people, nobody's done it. I mean, nobody's even picked up the phone and called.
The name of the game is get reelected. I don't care what it is, get reelected. So one of the ways in which people figure out how to get reelected is they have to hear from you. So I've given talks all over to teacher groups, and people are bemoaning Title I, but the reauthorization of Title I wasn't no secret.
And it's to make sure that the people who are closest to our children, parents and teachers, are the ones who somehow have a voice in what goes on in our public education system.
We are better equipped now than we were 29 years ago to argue the case for a powerful, progressive, active, community-rooted education, in part because there are so many more schools doing such good work. Many more today than in 1970. And that ought to be a strength. That ought to be something to build on.
So we thought that there might be some room to go in and try to use what we knew about communications to create a different frame for rural issues, and to make people understand, one, that there were other people in the same situation, allies who were facing the same kind of trouble, and two, that they might find allies in unlikely places across in those cities where people were facing some of the same challenges.
But at some point, it's not death necessarily. We have to be willing to give up something to try and make it a better world. And education at this point is making it a better world. And we must learn to organize first with ourselves to believe that it can be done.
We don't have an achievement gap. We have a mountain of debt.